not all of it is equal. And not all of it will have the same risk. So you have first to understand which type of AI you need in your business. And once you know, then you need to be aware what type of limitation and risk are associated with that type of AI, because they're not all the same.
This AI series has been incredible so far. And Kerensa and I were determined to keep the momentum going by bringing in another true AI expert, but this time from a bit of a different background. Today's guest is entrepreneur, AI influencer, and author, Dr. Djamila Amimer. Djamila holds a PhD in artificial intelligence and energy economics. She began her career in the oil and gas industry, where she quickly gravitated towards the immense potential of AI technology. And after spending significant spells at the likes of BP and Shell, Djamila took the leap of faith and founded her own consultancy firm specializing in educating and supporting businesses on their AI journey. I can honestly say this episode was just incredible. It was an absolute joy. Djamila delivered a masterclass on all the key elements of AI adoption, both from a technical and functional perspective. We delved into important topics like regulation, AI washing, and how common that is, the true definition of AI, which was very interesting, the hype around jobs displacement and what Djamila feels is realistic around that, the impact of AI on different demographics, and much, much more. This was a real treat. Kerensa and I took so much from this conversation. It was fabulous, and I'm sure you will feel the same. This is Dr. Djamila Amimer. So Dr. Djamila Amimer, thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast. We've been so excited about this. Kerensa and I really think that you add quite a bit of a unique or different perspective to the guests we've had on so far on this series and previously too. So thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you so much for the invite, and I'm looking forward to have the discussion with both you, Gareth and Kerensa.
Oh, thank you so much for being with us.
Brilliant. So let's start with a bang then, Djamila. What excites you most about AI technology innovation?
So what excites me most about AI is really the potential to use it for good. So using AI, to help us illnesses that we haven't been able to cure so far. Using AI, to help us, predict maybe, earthquakes or, emergencies so we can sort out before they happen. It's basically anything that can help us improve our overall life.
I really like that. What got you into AI in the first place?
That's a great question, Kerensa. So my journey started with mathematics. So I'm like a hard mathematician. So, as a young child, I always liked mathematics and, doing calculus and algebra and all that. And then I went to study operations research, which is applied math. So you apply mathematics to solve real problems, either whether business problems, societal problems. And then in my studies of operations research, I started, going into the area of fuzzy logic, using neural networks to solve problems, using genetic algorithms, and that become AI. So started with mathematics, operations research, and then it became fully fledged AI. So this is how I came up to AI.
And can I just ask, 'cause I'm dying to know, what was the subject of your PhD?
So my PhD was sponsored, from the parties from the energy sector. So it was basically using neural network and genetic algorithm to improve the decision making in the energy sector. So whether they have like an oil or gas reserves, there are like several ways on how you can produce that gas, for example. So finding the optimal way to produce it, taking all factors together, you could have different scenarios. So I use AI to find like the best decision, in terms of that economic decision, whether to go for the field or not.
Well, as an aside, a few years ago for the BBC, I made a program called Fossil Detectives. And each episode was dedicated to a different part of the UK. And the Scotland part, we went to film at an oil rig. And we also went to film back at base in some of the laboratories. And in Aberdeen, there was a microfossils laboratory. And their job was to drill core under the sea and dig out gigantic cores and look for microfossils and then analyze those, because that would perhaps give indication that there was the presence of natural oil or gas. And that was super exciting. And I think that was quite a long time ago. That was back in 2007. I think I filmed that. But it's interesting, isn't it? Using technology to prospect and understand and to be able to help us better understand the presence of oil and gas and then what we actually do with it.
Yeah. And obviously from that, then we moved on. So kind of like, I started, AI more than 25 years ago. So I didn't just jump into the AI hype. So back then we started then, but then, with the development of, renewables and the energy transition agenda, then kind of like the AI use, at least where I was in the energy sector, was more about how can we make the use of the renewables more efficient? How can we transition to wind and solar? How can we come up with the new business models? So kind of there are ways on how you can use AI even within the energy sector, but still from a good perspective, from, the good umbrella, agenda.
Can I just rewind back then, Djamila, to the around the time when you sort of graduated and were trying to decide which vocational direction you were going to go into? Why oil and gas? Why did that world appeal to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously that's kind of like, we are talking about like 25 years back then. So I think at that time, the energy sector was one of the most prominent sectors in terms of, contribution to the country's GDP, whether it's the UK or even when you look, worldwide, kind of in terms of, Americas, the Middle East, kind of like oil and gas is like a big item in terms of the country's, economies. It also, maybe not everyone knows that, but even from a green agenda, the people who, say, we should stop oil and we should stop gas. We should just acknowledge that there are like a lot of things that we use in our everyday life. Even like if you use an iPhone and a laptop, most of the plastic, the components of that comes from the energy sector. Even if you are medicine, in pharmaceutical products, you will find chemical, derived product from the energy sector. So I always been aware of that double-edged sword that, it has positive, but it has negative. So I wanted to go into that to make some good, because I believe some of the most significant changes you can make is from the inside rather than, from the outside. So I wanted to go in there and slowly by going into the career ladder, in this sector to try to make, significant contribution on how those companies kind of make decision and include environmental impacts, include kind of all those society, sustainability perspective in that decision making.
It's fascinating because today we talk a lot about ESG, and I think the world has become an awful lot more climate conscious in the last decade. And it sounds like you were really ahead of the curve because you were thinking about planet, climate, society, and those sort of dimensions, even when you were a teenager in early 20s emerging into your adult life.
Yeah, Kerensa, and that's right. Even when you look at the oil and gas companies, obviously not all of them are equal. Some of them are more, mature, in the debate when it comes of, the impact. So I started working for BP in the energy sector. I worked there for like 4 years, and then I spent another 15 years with Shell. So kind of like with Shell, obviously as we progress, in time, the thinking becomes more progressive. So you would hear kind of like most of the senior leaders, including the CEO of Shell at that time, talking about, part of the solution. We don't want to be part of the problem. We want to be part of the solution. So let's talk about energy transition and how can we kind of all contribute to kind of that new world. So I've been lucky in my last few years in the energy sector because then I changed career and I became fully fledged in AI. So before it was AI in the energy sector, and then it becomes kind of just like AI in business. In my last few years, I was in a central team that has the task basically to develop a new strategy for Shell to move to a new world, what we call energy transition. So I was kind of leading projects looking at kind of how can we turn Shell into doing business in renewables, in wind? How can we reduce the carbon footprint of the business operation? How can you reduce methane? So I had the chance to impact those decisions and contribute to the overall strategy that will hopefully move the kind of like the company from being like an oil and gas company to a purely energy company. And you can see when you look at investments, like a lot of investments that Shell made in, the wind business, in the farm, when you look at charging, electricity for vehicles, a lot of investments is being made, in this infrastructure. So the money is going there. At least it's starting to flow in that direction.
Which I suppose gave you the most amazing grounding from a more macro business sense, how you can apply AI for business outcomes as well as, for societal outcomes. And I'm a huge believer in good business can lead to good outcomes for society. And Gareth and I are thinking obviously about your current business and how you got into that and what that does. And it's just really interesting, the grounding that you had working in one particular sector that then added it into a sort of springboard for you to move into a more macro sense to help businesses across society.
Absolutely. That's a great point you raised, Kerensa. So kind of from an academic point of view, I had like a strong acumen because I've done a PhD in AI. And then I have accumulated this worth of, business experience, working in the energy sector. And then towards the beginning of 2018, decided to leave. Not kind of all, but basically leave Shell, leave the energy sector. I have set up my own company called Mind Senses Global, which is a boutique AI management consultancy. So my main goal is to help businesses and organizations apply AI, whether that's corporate big clients, or whether it's like a small businesses, small startups, or even like SMEs, apply AI. And because I had the privilege of using AI in a business context, so kind of like all those pitfalls and all those things that people struggle with when they get to implementing AI, because talking about AI is something, applying or implementing AI is something else. And unless you had that experience dealing with that, then, you have to go through kind of a lot of obstacles and struggles. So most of the time, I try to kind of cut through the chase and go through kind of like the main issues. And maybe you will be surprised. So most of the clients I talk to, a lot of them, they come, Djamila, we would like to apply AI. We heard this great tool. We have ChatGPT, whatever, and they want to apply it. But they say, no. That's not the way you should think about it.
Sure.
Always have seen technology and AI as a means to an end. So for me, say, okay, let's park that discussion. Let's forget about AI for a second. Tell me, what is your business problem? Let's start with the problem. Are you looking after improving margins? Do you want to reduce risk? Do you want to improve customer satisfaction? What is the issue in your business operation? What is your business strategy? Once we understand the problem, okay, let's start to find the solution for it. And then if there is an AI way to help, then we will bring AI. Otherwise, we're not going to even get to that discussion. Because a lot of businesses just jump into the tool and they forget about the business context and why they're using AI in the first place.
Exactly. I mean, going back to first principles, I mean, I'm sure you're seeing this, Djamila, but there's a lot of, and it's not so much in terms of companies, but just all use cases. There's a lot of AI, things being badged as AI, which are just automation, or they're just in some cases it's just software. There's a lot of AI washing with things. What is AI in your? What is the definition of AI?
That's a great question. I love that question.
But can I just put a filter on it in a business context, though? Yeah.
So going back to the AI definition, what is AI? So the definition I like the most is the one by John McCarthy. So he was the first person who coined the term AI. So that was back in 1956. And why he defined AI, and I'm just like taking note kind of from the proper definition. So he said AI is the science and the engineering of making intelligent machines.
Oh,
so
wow.
This is what is AI.
I've never heard that.
So he was the first person who came up with the term AI. So obviously you can see from the definition is a little bit vague, because you may ask, okay, so what does it mean to have an intelligent machines? And this is kind of the core issue in AI. One thing we need to understand is that AI is not one thing. AI is a combination of things. It's not just one thing. So for some people, AI it means robotics. For others, it means just smartphones. So if you're using a smartphone and you're engaging with that AI bot, so that's AI. For others, it's the predictive power of AI. So predicting when something is going to happen, predicting a risk, predicting a breakdown, predicting, something. And for others, which is in the last 2-3 years, since kind of the introduction of ChatGPT, it means generative AI. It means generating pictures, generating videos, generating text. So all of that is AI. And then not all of it is equal, and not all of it will have the same risk. So you have first to understand which type of AI you need in your business. And once you know, then you need to be aware what type of limitation and risk are associated with that type of AI, because they're not all the same. So your question, when do you know whether it's AI or not? Because there is a lot of hype around that. And there was a statistic, it's a little bit outdated because now it's around 4 or 5 years ago. There was a survey where they asked European AI startups about their AI, offering and AI products. And then from the survey and the thorough investigation, they found that there were something around 70% of those European AI startups actually didn't use AI. They were just using the term AI because it's just fancy, not anymore right now because, we have more awareness right now. But back then, a few years ago, you will have higher likelihood of gaining more funding if you just suddenly say that I'm doing an AI project, or my startup is an AI startup, or I'm developing an AI project. So this is where you need to be very careful. My rule of thumb. So when I talk to people, say, how do I know whether it's AI or not AI? As a quick, simple rule of thumb, question you can, ask yourself is there a learning? So the learning bit is critical. So is the system learning? So for example, we do an iteration of the system or the AI model. Then the AI model takes that result and then use the learning to produce the next iteration. So if there is a feedback loop that improves the learning of the model, then it's probably AI. If there is no learning and there is no iteration that improves based on the previous lessons, then it's probably not AI.
Well, that's an interesting test to base it on, whether it's AI or not. I've not heard that before either, Djamila. I'm learning a lot today, I have to say already, Kerensa. This episode is part of the Tech Leaders Podcast AI Series 2.0, brought to you by bedigital. At bedigital, we empower leadership teams to maximize value from their technology investments. Our data and AI services help businesses fully embrace the potential of artificial intelligence. We prepare your data, we streamline your processes, and ensure robust governance so that AI works effortlessly to drive real results. Curious to learn more? Visit bedigitaluk.com or follow us on social media to discover how AI can transform your business. Just take the conversation back onto your chronology, your career trajectory then. I'm really keen to understand. You worked for two of the major oil and gas companies, energy companies even in the world, in Shell and BP. What sort of major lessons do you think you learned which you took into your own entrepreneurial adventure with setting up Mind Senses Global? What did you take from working for these these global companies that served you well as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So I think because I had the privilege to leading and implementing several, initiatives and, in these companies. So what I have learned the most, and which also helped me in my current day activities with my clients, is that I understood kind of the value and the efforts to make changes. Whenever you want to make a business transformation or a digital transformation, whatever kind of transformation you would like to make or to lead, you need to take account of the culture of the organization. You need to be aware of the time and the speed and the efforts you need to make those changes happen. So kind of like being aware of the cultural aspect, how businesses work, especially processes, because those big companies, I don't like to use kind of like the word bureaucratics because they're not, but because they're so huge. So there are thousands of procedures and manuals and things. If you want to judge something, there is a whole list of things you need to go about and, and go and, get a sign off, a lot of people. So knowing how to navigate the policy and the culture of the company, that has really helped me a lot in my current work. Because changes takes a lot of time. And maybe if I can add, to link it to AI. So, I don't know if, both of you, Gareth and Kerensa, you have seen, what they call the cost of technology curve. Usually when a technology is at the early stage, it's high. And then by time it starts kind of to lower. And this is true for most of the technologies. And I think this is one of the excuses people use for not going into AI right now. Some of them, they may say, look, Djamila, AI is too expensive for now. We know technology is going to get cheaper. Let's wait until, to get a lower cost, and we will jump into that wave. So this is correct for most of the technology. But what I say to my clients, this is not valid for AI, because I see AI more than a technology. I see it as a way of thinking. Don't think that you can bring AI, put it in your business, and for it to start working from day one. You need to change the culture of your company. You need to change the way they work, the way they think, the way they collect the data, the way they make decisions for making AI successful. And if you lose that culture learning and that transformation learning, if you don't, you are just waiting for the cost, you will lose. You will never, get to the same speed and pace with the ones that have already started, because not only they are applying AI, but they're learning from the mistakes. They're adjusting their organizations. They're changing the way they work. So this is to say, do not wait. Don't just look at the cost of the technology curve. Take into the account that it's a whole transformation. You need to have AI in the DNA of your company for it to work successfully.
I think there's two things there that I think are both important. One is going back to what you said before, which is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And it may or may not be that technology and or AI is appropriate for that particular problem. But if you've identified that actually AI can help, the sooner you start organizing your data, cleansing your data, making it accessible, the sooner you can start benefiting. Because I think you're right, people don't quite see the relationship between just sticking in a bit of AI software and the fact that their company data actually has to be fit for purpose.
Absolutely, Kerensa. So the post bit, the pre bit, before applying AI, I always say AI is a tool. It's kind of, you put data, bad data will give you garbage, garbage in, garbage out. So you need to put a lot of efforts in the pre kind of AI application. But another, I'm going into the failure type of, the pitfalls type of thinking where, business struggle the most. So once they go through that hurdle, they put the efforts in the data and they clean it and they have all the tunnels and they're working, and then they run kind of the AI model. Another pitfall is afterwards, is the post AI kind of deployment. A lot of businesses and teams, they forget about monitoring the tool. They test the accuracy, it's working. Okay, that's it. They press a button, they forget about the tool. They forget that they need to monitor the AI model. There are a lot of models, AI models that drift in terms of performance, and they need to be kept monitoring. So there is a famous example of Zillow, which is an AI startup in the real estate agency. So they built an AI model to predict price houses. And then based on that price house, market prediction, then they start buying the houses from the households. So at the beginning, it was working fine because the accuracy of the model was very high. But then because there were other factors. So some of the other factors is that like the model was not tested enough and there were issues with, kind of governance and so on. But there were the aspect of the lack of monitoring. So after a while, they stopped monitoring the tool in terms of whether the performance is still high or not. And then because of that, they lost hundreds of millions because they kept buying those houses that were overestimated. So they made a loss.
Right. Yeah.
Fortunately, after a while, they were able to spot the problem and they rectify it and so on. But this is a big issue for businesses who don't monitor their models afterwards.
For our listeners who may have heard the term but perhaps don't know what it is, would you mind explaining about AI hallucinations and how dangerous they can be?
So that's another favorite topic. So I guess before we talk about hallucination, we need to put it into a context. So if you talk about hallucination, you are only talking about generative AI. So it's just one piece of AI. It's not the whole of AI. Sure. As a definition of generative AI, so the main goal is to generate. And I don't want to go into the details because it becomes too complex. But basically what we are using natural language processing, so NLP, plus transformers, so a little bit of, function to understand the semantic. And then what the model does using transformers and tokenization and all that is going to predict the next word. So each time the model predicts what should be the next word in that sentence, what should be the next and next and next until you have, a good formulated paragraph. So hallucination by definition is a design feature. Because kind of like the generative AI model is built in such a way to answer and to generate text. So the problem is, especially for topics where there is not a lot of training on that topic. So I don't know if you ask ChatGPT about the weather. So we know that ChatGPT has been, has like billions of parameters. It has been trained on a lot of books, the whole Wikipedia, the whole internet that went into that training. So you would guess that there is a lot of subject about the weather in that whole thing. But if you ask it about a very, kind of like niche area, there will be very little data in that kind of training bit. So because kind of the model by design has to answer and has to predict the next word. So if I ask it, talk to me about using genetic algorithm to go to the moon, which has absolutely no sense, yeah? Predict genetic, and then AI, can genetic algorithm try to predict what's the next word. It starts making no sense because it's just generating what should be the next. And if you ask it, can you give me a reference? Can you give me a book title on this subject using genetic algorithms to go to the moon? So even though we know that there is no book or no articles on that, by design, the model will start fabricating because it has to give an answer. It will give you, such an author, Djamila, wrote a book on this in 2010, and it was a book with this title, and it has 200 pages and so on. All that is fictional because we know it doesn't exist in real life. But because the model, it has to answer and it has to predict the next word, then it will keep predicting and saying things. So my advice for people, and because it's a feature from the design, there are like ways to reduce it, but you cannot eliminate it because that's how generative AI works. So my advice for clients is that you shouldn't use generative AI unless you know the topic you are dealing with. So that's one thing. And then if you don't know, at least you have a way to check the facts.
Yeah.
Those are two important questions. So if you don't know the topic and there is no way you can check whether that paragraph that was written by the tool has factual, a right factual, aspect or not, then you shouldn't use generative AI. That's kind of a very, very big risk, especially if your application deals with external, has a customer perspective. There are a lot of examples where we have failures. For example, there was a delivery company who used generative AI, in their bot. So it becomes an AI generative bot. And then suddenly the bot with a little bit of manipulation, starting saying bad things about the company, saying that the company is not performing, that you shouldn't use this company, you should use the competitors and so on. So there are risk associated, especially if it's external, because your whole external reputation is based on that AI bot. And if it says something bad about you, you cannot just go and do it because the damage is done. But also it has implication even if it is internal. So there was an example, not to name the name, but an example of a big phone company, a mobile company that used generative AI internally, not externally. So they let their employees loose, say, okay, experiment with those tools, see what can happen. And by error, or by kind of lack of awareness, what the employees did is that they wrongly put kind of their intellectual property patents about their next mobile into the question, into the prompt. Obviously, anything you put into the model, when you ask the tool, it goes into the model and there is no way for you to get it back. So without making it in purpose, they have eventually given a commercially patented kind of like a confidential piece of information into the tool. So anytime, if someone is lucky, they can manipulate the tool to get back that information and the competitor can use it. So be very, very careful when you use generative AI tools, whether internally or externally. Obviously the external bit is has more impact because your whole reputation is based on that.
I mean, what you've touched on there in both the property software and the requirement to monitor, and in generative AI, being aware of your own subject matter, there's the human intelligence and the importance that humans play. I wonder if you wouldn't mind just saying a bit about your point of view on that.
Absolutely. That's a good point, Kerensa. And this is why you see kind of most of those big companies, developing generative AI. So now what they're doing is they're introducing humans in the loop. Obviously, they cannot introduce human in every single topic. But for example, big topics that have very big ethical, considerations. So I don't know, talking bad things about maybe women or, people from minor, ethnicity. Topics that are like very, very big and, we shouldn't really say bad things about them. So in there, you can see that the big companies have employed humans in the loop. So when someone says something bad or put like a bad prompt in that subject, that supervision, that human supervision will then the tool will say, sorry, we cannot talk about this topic. Or, please, can you reframe your question? So they're introducing humans in the loops to try to address this. Maybe if you allow me, Gareth and Kerensa, where we are talking about generative AI, and I think that's something important for businesses, but also people, because there are like a lot of people experimenting with generative AI tools. They're playing with, they're, generating videos and text and so on. And this is going back when I defined AI. It's very important to know which type of AI we're talking about because they're not all equals. So let's talk about AI. So for example, in AI, we also find machine learning and deep learning, and then you find generative AI. Machine learning and for some extent deep learning is used a lot, to predict things. So for example, if I'm a refinery, in the energy sector, I can use AI to predict when my refinery is going to break down. So I can then fix it before it happens. Or from a safety perspective, I can put videos that kind of analyze whether my people are putting their safety helmets, that they're putting the safety gears in their work. And if not, it can signals to me that there is something wrong. So there is a lot about like the risk prediction where you can see machine learning and deep learning is useful. tool. Obviously, I touched a little bit on generative AI, where we see the transformers and, the NLP and so on. But when it comes to the environmental impact of using AI, not all AI is equal. So generative AI is very, very bad when it comes to environmental impact. For people who are just playing with those tools for fun, they need to understand. So, for example, if someone in average, they use between 5 to, 50, requests in the tool, prompts, for example. So for those 5 to 50 prompts used, in the tool, just for the training, it consumes the equivalent of 5 cars over a lifetime carbon emission, carbon dioxide. This is only training. If you look at the whole life cycle, because there is pre-training, there is post-training, the deployment, the inference, the lifetime, that carbon emission doubles. But it doesn't only stop at carbon. It also touches on water, especially countries where there is already a shortage of water. So again, for the same quantity of prompts, between 5 to 50, prompts, the models or the data centers that kind of train that model, it consumes around half a liter of fresh water. So every time you put a prompt to generate a text or generate a video or an image, know that you are emitting carbon and you are using fresh water. So now if you're using generative AI for good purposes, it's fine, because you can say, but I'm going to use it for good, and the positive of this outweigh the negative. But if you are only using it for fun, or even for worse, to generate like deep fakes and, propagate like bad things, not only you are using it for bad things, but you are also impacting the planet, because you are also emitting carbon and using water. So people need to be aware of that.
Even though I completely agree with everything you've said on that point, I really don't think the utilization and usage for any purpose of AI technology and large language models is going to calm down anytime soon. If anything, is going to proliferate. So I think the question I got for you is, can we be more efficient with this in terms of the environmental impact of large language models and artificial intelligence technology? Can OpenAI and other major vendors like them take more accountability for this and do this more sustainably and more environmentally responsible, in your opinion?
Yeah, so this is kind of like looking into the future. And as I said, we shouldn't treat all of AI, because most of the business application, by the way, because the generative AI that we only heard about like 3 years ago, it has obviously some benefits in terms of, efficiency and so on. But from my point of view and my business experience in applying AI, most of the beneficial AI is not generative AI. It's the older AI we had before kind of this whole hype happened 3 years ago. It's the power to predict. It's predicting a risk when it's going to happen. It's predicting like a breakdown. It's predicting a safety bit. It's improving margins. It's not just necessarily being limited to generating text and videos and so on. So we shouldn't kind of forget about the older AI, because it's that bit of AI that has most potential looking into the future. But if we look into the future as a whole, so obviously there's been a tendency, especially with generative AI, that the models are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And if we want to make a breakthrough in the future, this trend has to change. This is not sustainable. We need to find a way to train and make smaller models more effective. So find new algorithms, new methods, new mathematical things that can make, the small models more accurate, and probably maybe even given better outcome than the big model. So we need to put money into the smaller model. But it's a lot of more than that. So when I talk about, generative AI and the future of AI, so for me, there are like 4 blocks. The first block is what is missing from the current AI, whether it's standard AI, whether it's generative AI, is what I call a causal reasoning. And what I mean, so the example that I use the most is the example of malaria and fever. So the AI we have right now, whether it's generative AI or whether it's the other type of AI, is based on statistics. So the current AI will find a strong correlation between malaria and fever. but it doesn't have the causal reasoning. It would not understand that it is malaria that is causing the fever. And unless we find a way to bring causal reasoning, so A is causing B, then we are not going to make a breakthrough for the future. So causal reasoning is a big must for me in the future. The second one is, we talked about a bit, which I call the energy efficiency. So using smaller, models. So there is a lot of experiments in the US in the defense area where they are studying natural intelligence. So they're studying bees and swarms. They call swarm intelligence. They all have very, very small brains, but they still compute a lot of things compared to kind of those models. So they're trying to be inspired by nature to try to make our models smaller and by definition then more energy efficient. So that's my second factor. Yeah. My third factor is what we call the transfer of learning. So we need to find a way to make the learning from one domain or one concept to move to another domain. So right now, the AI we have is what we call is narrow AI. And what that means, it works very, very well for a given task. So if we have an AI bot that you have trained to talk, in financial terms, then it's working fine. But take the same bot without any changes and put it in a medical application or in the health sector, then the whole bot will fail. And I'm only using a bot because that's the simplest application of AI. I'm not talking about predicting big things. So even the bot knows how to kind of generate inputs and outputs and dialogue with people. You just choose the domain knowledge and it's suddenly you need to retrain it from scratch. So the transfer of learning is important. So we have causal reasoning, we have efficiency of the computation, we have transfer of knowledge. And then my last block or factor to move to that future I would like to see is a new way or hybrid of algorithm. As I said, AI is not one thing. It's neuroscience, it's mathematics, it's statistics, a lot of things. We need a new hybrid of algorithm that bring different discipline. So we need to see something from obviously statistics, but we need to bring the swarm intelligence. We need to bring fuzzy logic. We need to bring game theory. We need to bring the theory of chaos. We need to bring a lot of theories. And from that, have a new hybrid of algorithms that will take us that. It's not the current algorithms that will do it. We need to have a new type of algorithm. And hopefully the combination of those four things will bring, jump us to a new level of AI. That's kind of my personal opinion.
I have to, I don't know about you, Kerensa, but my brain is going in all directions by here. I mean, it's a fountain of knowledge on this stuff. I have to say, it's fantastic. I don't know what you think, Kerensa, but it's...
I think we should bill this episode as a masterclass.
Getting back on topic anyway. So there was loads of things there you said, which we could maybe unpack a little bit, but obviously I'm just conscious of time now. I wanted to ask about regulation. I understand you're on the board. Oh, sorry, you do a lot of volunteer work. I know you're in the European Commission.
That a lot of work I do, and that's something I'm passionate about. When we talk about, there is a whole big idea, aspect of the ethical aspect of AI. The bias of AI, and then that comes kind of with the regulation to try to protect us as a society. So let's say that kind of obviously AI is a tool, and what you put in it, you get it out, at the end. So because those models have been, trained on whatever is available in the internet, and it's the views of us as a society. We know as a society, there are a lot of bias. So we know, I don't like to go into too much details, but there are a lot of examples where tools have failed. They have been biased. So, for example, there is the Amazon recruitment tool that was biased, against women versus men. So, for the same job application, the same CV, just one female and male, the tool will choose to interview the male one and not the female one. There is the famous example of using AI in the US legal aspect, the Compass algorithm that was biased against black defenders. So, the likelihood of a defender offending again again for the second time, was given a higher likelihood for the black versus the white, whereas in reality, it wasn't the case. So we see a lot of bias that comes from that. But the bias comes from the data, and it comes from the ignorance of people who are building and testing those tools. A lot of those tools fail because the tools have not built enough. So first of all, we need to be aware that there will be bias on those tools coming from the data. And you need to be aware on the business application. So if I'm developing an AI recruitment tool, to help with filtering the resumes or doing an interview thing, I need to be aware of my AI limitations. So if I'm using it to select candidates, I need to be aware that the statistics and the figures, so if we go back even to not too far, even in the 1980s or the 1970s, if I talk about a doctor, the likelihood of an average doctor being a male would be higher than a female. Whereas right now, it's equal. You go to the hospital, it may be a female, it may be a male. It's not a surprise anymore. Or engineering. So we know that the recruitment patterns of today is very different from the past. And this is what I'm saying. AI predicts your future based on your past. So if you know that your past has significantly changed, then you know that you will be in trouble. So be aware of that. So that's and you need to then, take ethical principles and use mitigation strategies to accommodate that. But going back to the recruitment bit, there are companies who use AI to for example, if they're interviewing me via videos, they're using AI to detect whether I'm smiling, and then they will try to see what is my emotion and all that. Before applying the tool, you need to find understand the limitations. So the science behind, so if I use deep learning or AI, whatever, AI tool to detect, so an AI tool can detect my smile. And it can detect that my mouth is a certain curve, whatever, from the picture. So that's fine. What is not fine is then interpreting that curve or that movement in my mouth as being a smile, and then as being I'm happy. Yeah. So it's the happiness bit, because that happiness emotion bit, it comes from a cultural aspect. Not everyone, when smiling, means the same thing. People sometimes smile because they're happy. Sometimes, in some culture, they're smiling because they're stressed or something. Or the same thing when they have, with their eyebrows. So the interpretation, moving from movement to emotion, even when you look at the science, the theory behind it is very, very weak. So you need to understand those limitations before that. And this is why we need regulation, because we see a lot of money is being poured in some of those niche pockets. They're not being tested enough. The science is not mature enough, but still billions going into that, and they're being used. So to protect us as a society, I would obviously, I'm in favor of regulation to try to put some scope and some limitation to what to use AI for and not. So you mentioned the EU bit. So there is the recent EU Act that has basically divided AI in categories. So there is prohibited AI, where they say we will prohibit AI for certain use. And then there is AI with high risk. So they said you can use AI for high risk, but you have to do a certain protocols. You have to make sure that you have mitigation solutions into it. They have to put a body that will look into those algorithms. And you need it's a monitoring bit. You need to keep monitoring, and you need to make sure you satisfy and you get a certificate, and you have to pay for it. And one of those sectors that belong to the high risk category is the recruitment sector, is the educational sector, and so on. So you can apply for this, but you have to be thorough and go through a whole certain procedures to be able to do that. And there is the other, level where you can apply AI, but, as long as, for example, if you're using a chatbot that is using AI, you need to make aware to people that they're talking to AI and they're not talking to a human being. So there's certain regulation emerging. So obviously this is the EU, and we found like other initiative emerging in the US and in other parts of the world. But we need some kind of regulation. Obviously you need to get the right balance, because you don't want to have a tough regulation that will stop the whole innovation in AI. But leaving it loose is not the answer.
You're working at the moment with a lot of business leaders. So I suppose, how do you make it simple enough for them to think about the sorts of considerations they should be putting in place as they're going about implementing technologies, particularly technologies involving AI?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kerensa. So in the work I do, and like I do with my team in the firm, is so we offer 4 main services, and you wouldn't be surprised that the first one we offer is AI education, because there are like a lot of clients who comes and say, we would like to apply AI, but actually they don't even understand, what is AI. So we put a lot of effort into educated them through masterclasses or workshops or, tailored for business executive, explaining to them what is AI, but also giving, use cases, illustrating use cases on how AI can help their businesses. But in that kind of education, the education doesn't stop there. We always have modules around, how to come up with an AI strategy, what are the AI risks. We take them through kind of the AI regulation. I give them, illustration of the AI bias, so they're aware of the limitation. And when it comes to AI, so when I sit with my client, as I said before, we always start with the business problem, not AI. So that's one thing, let's park AI, let's understand the business problem. Once we understand the business problem, then we go into AI, okay, what it is and what type of AI, can help us in this. And then depending on the AI, as I said, not all of AI is equal. So depending on which AI we use, that AI will have a specific kind of limitation and risk. So if we understand the AI we are using and the type of it, then we can understand. So, the risk associated with machine learning or deep learning will be very different from the risk we experience, with generative AI. So first of all, understanding, the limitation of the tool, the risk of the tool. And then we try if we understand, so for example, especially also the domain knowledge, where are we applying AI? Are we applying AI in recruitment? Are you applying AI in the energy sector? Are we applying AI in health, in for transporting the, electric vehicles and so on? So depending which area, each sector and each type of AI will have a different type of limitation. So understanding that is the first bit. And then we try, okay, what is mitigation? So some of the mitigation may come on the data itself. So how can we clean the data? How can we balance the data? If we have very small data on, for example, on women or ethnic minority, and I'm using my recruitment tool for the whole population, or my health application for the whole population, how can we balance the difference of size of those data? There are like statistical techniques that you can use and mathematical techniques you can use to balance this, what they call skewed data. Then we look at the method, the algorithm itself. You shouldn't only use one AI algorithm and that's it. You should be using different algorithms. And then if you use 4 or 5, then try to find which one gives you the best accuracy, which ones, has the minimal kind of like false negative, positive false kind of like results. So you have to do rigorous testing. And this is what we see missing. A lot of companies don't put a lot of efforts on the testing bit. And again, don't have diverse teams. So for example, there were some tools that, had bias, especially the facial recognition team, and they've been banned by some companies. But initially, do you know that like most of the facial recognition software, most of the data, I think 80% of the data has been trained on white people, not ethnic minority people. And then among the white people, another big percentage, another 75% was trained on men. So you can, most of the data are white than for the facial recognition. Then you need to be aware if you are going to use the facial recognition for women or for, ethnic minority, then you know that you will be in trouble because, the data, has not been included on the training. So all this you need to be aware of, and depending the nature of the algorithm, the nature of the application, you need then to put mitigation in aspect. And then one last tip from me is if you include ethical design, ethical principle, you put all those mitigation strategies at the beginning, is fine. But if you don't, you train your model, you test it, and then you apply it, like, the Amazon tool or, any other tool, and then you find it's a problem. What has been the trend so far? I don't know if Gareth, you and Kerensa have seen. Most of the tools that were found to be biased, they have been shelved. They have not been kind of adjusted and amended and rectified. Why? Because it is very, very expensive to rectify a problem after kind of the tool has been trained and deployed. This is why you should include all those considerations at the early design stage. Because if you leave it out, then it becomes very costly, a lot of effort, a lot of money to rectify. You are better off shelving the tool and starting from scratch.
So I really wanted to ask you about this. So hopefully we can finish on this one. It's kind of like the elephant of the room when it comes to AI innovation and the proliferation of generative AI technology. And that is jobs displacement, okay? Are we going to be replaced by robots, essentially? What is your thoughts on this topic of jobs displacement as a result of AI innovation over the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
That's a great question because I think there is a lot of credit given that is being given to AI. And when you look at the current capabilities, we are far, far, far away from a future where, kind of when I earlier defined that there is a narrow AI, and then above it, there is what they call the general AI. And then above it is the super intelligence AI. And that one is just what you see in the Hollywood movies. We are very, very far from anything like that happening. Honestly, all what we see now are statistical models that have been trained on billions of data that gives kind of like the impression that they're like, so intelligent. But when you dig down, there is absolutely so far no intelligence in them. As I said, there is even no causal reasoning. It will only find the correlation between malaria and fever. It wouldn't even understand that it is the malaria causing the fever. So we are very far, from that future. So this is for people not to worry about that. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be impact on the jobs. My type of future, I see kind of like an augmentation of the intelligence, where the human are being augmented by the capabilities of the machine. So there have been a piece of research that look kind of what kind of future jobs we may see in the future and the type of impacts. So the impact I see is that, the machine will be able to handle a lot of the repetitive, mundane admin task, really the task that we see as boring. Me as a person, as Djamila, I don't want to do it because it's just too much and I keep repeating manually and putting inputs on the spreadsheet. That's a very good type of thing because then I can use my brain to do something more kind of like efficient in terms of, being more creative, more innovative and so on. So we will see a diminution of jobs that has a lot of repetitive mundane work, and we will see an increase of jobs that has a need for cognition, not only cognition, emotional intelligence, any type of interaction that the machines cannot do. We will see a lot of jobs going into that. Having said that, and maybe that's something that is important for me and Kerensa from kind of like a women gender, debate. When we look at those mundane, repetitive tasks that we would like to get rid of, depending on the sectors, is not valid for all sectors, but there are some sectors, for example, like financial or banking, those mundane, repetitive work, we will see that there are like a lot of women who do that because a lot of, if we go to a bank, right now we don't see a lot of clerk, office bit, but a lot of like the repetitive work that used to be done in the bank, there are like more women doing it compared to men, because a lot of those jobs are part-time, and because women obviously take some time off because of their kids, or because of their family responsibilities. It means when we talk about impact on the jobs, certain sectors, women would be more impacted compared to men, because they tend to do those repetitive, mundane work in some sectors, not all of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a raging debate and or on topic of conversation, isn't it, in terms of jobs displacement across all industries. So yeah, no, it was really great to get your thoughts. Djamila, it's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. Where can people find you, and where can they find your business? I understand you're very active on LinkedIn as well. Can you tell us how people can reach out to you and keep tabs on what you're doing?
Gareth, I really enjoyed the discussion with both of you and Kerensa. So my business is called MindSenses Global. So the website is mindsenses.co.uk. And as you said, I'm very, very active in LinkedIn. So if anyone would like to follow me or connect with me in LinkedIn, you can find me in LinkedIn under the name of Dr. Djamila Amimer. I should be among the few ones in there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Djamila. Thank you for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
So I have to say, Kerensa, when it started, I asked, obviously, the opening question, and her answer was quite, it was a good answer, but it was obviously, it wasn't an enormous answer compared to some people. It was punchy, exactly. And I thought, obviously we may need to ask a lot of questions in this interview, but actually it was quite the contrary. It's just unbelievable. It just felt very natural. She clearly lives and breathes this stuff, doesn't she?
Yeah, she does. She's a true professional, but she's also someone who, passion is such a great word, isn't it? She has a gigantic appetite for learning herself. And what comes across so much is that she loves helping make all this stuff accessible for others. So she's playing almost like a constant educative role, I think, in her business and in her conversation with us. The pure joy that she's getting from her field was palpable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those cases. She's been involved in the field of AI for a very long time, and only only more recently as it really appeared in the mainstream. And I just think it was brilliant to talk to a true expert about all of these on-trend issues and talking points around AI. And I think it was really fascinating to find out about the oil and gas sector as well. You often forget about AI's impact on these more industrial and physical world, shall we call, industries.
Yes, but I do think the theme of energy came through in so many dimensions across the conversation.
Yeah,
because
it did, yeah.
She also showed that we need to be climate conscious in the way that we actually use any AI as well, and thinking about the compute power that is being used, but also the environmental damage potentially sustained anytime you do even a simple prompt. So I thought it was really interesting that she's come at it from a perspective of being in her early 20s, wanting to make a difference to the planet, wanting to make a difference to society, joining the energy sector specifically so that she could help play that part from the inside. And now here she is the other side of that, and helping our listeners understand the environmental impacts of using some of these technologies. And so just being aware, that kind of raising awareness piece, I think was very, very key to what she was trying to do.
Thank you so much, Kerensa. It was brilliant. We've got another fantastic guest coming up soon. We won't spoil it. We'll announce it soon. But yeah, this AI series is going amazingly well, and I'm learning lots, and we're talking about all the main issues. I look forward to the next one.
Brilliant working with you. Thanks, Gareth.
This episode was brought to you by bedigital. Bedigital support leadership teams to optimize cost and get more out of technology investments. Bedigital and the team have unrivaled expertise with technology license management and data remediation, and are therefore perfectly positioned to help prepare organizations for AI technology capability. And on the last point, bedigital have developed a cutting-edge AI readiness assessment, which provides tech leaders with a platform they need to make well-informed decisions about AI adoption strategy in 2024 and beyond. Go to bedigital UK to find out more and get in touch.